Welcome, first time, some of you. Thank you for joining us. A hot topic, a big hot button issue that a lot of people with nystagmus, families especially, people with, want to know about is driving. It's on our list every year of some of the top concerns that people have. And so what we like to do is to provide the best information we can, knowing that people live in various places and there are different rules, but I won't get into that. But it's a pleasure to introduce Aida Weber. Aida, I came across Aida, who works at the Courage Kenny Veterans Rehabilitation Institute here in Minneapolis and in the driving assessment program. She's from South Carolina. Guess what, everybody? She got lost on the way here driving. So totally wasn't her fault. But with that, I'll just say thank you so much for all the preparation and that you've put into today and for meeting with this wonderful group of people. So I give you Aida Weber.
All right, well, great introduction. I am, like Jim said, I'm Aida Weber. I have been doing driving for a number of years. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about my background. Like Jim said, I'm from South Carolina originally. I moved here 8.5 years ago and never have driven in the snow at all. So I was like, oh, what am I doing, you know? And then I was doing home health right when I moved here, and I decided to go into something different. And it just kind of dropped into my lap about the driving evaluation and being a driving rehab specialist. It's funny, the HR person said, you know, have you ever thought about doing driving as an OT? I said, you know, I remember being a student and having somebody like me come into the classroom and talking about driving, and I thought she was the craziest person in the world. Why would you want to drive with, you know, you don't know who's going to be in the car and how they're going to drive? So I always thought that that was kind of a little crazy for her to do that. But here I am, so I guess I'm a little crazy too. So I want to talk about driving and how that pertains to vision. You know, whether or not you do have some visual deficits, whether it's nystagmus, as all of you have, and as well as acuity issues, peripheral vision issues, or what have you. So we'll talk more about that. Talking about driving evaluations and what we do and what I do and what I can provide, different standards for each state and what they usually entail as far as acuity measures and visual peripheral vision measures. And other options. So, you know, yes, maybe you're a candidate for driving, but you may need some different kinds of adaptive devices in order to drive, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, okay? So a little bit about our program. I work for Courage Kenny Rehab Institute, and we've been doing this since 1978, so for a very, very long time. We see about 1,000 clients a year. We go to 10 different locations around the Twin Cities. And we see anywhere between very new drivers, you know, for parents that are not really sure whether their son or daughter should or shouldn't drive, they come see us. They don't need necessarily a permit. We can see them in the clinic as well as in the parking lot and see where they are. And then I also see people anywhere between the whole spectrum to about age 101. So I was lucky enough to have my oldest client, 101 years old, came to see me this year, and he was the funniest guy ever. And he was, I think he knew that was his last time he was going to drive, and we finished the clinical part, and then we went to do behind the wheel. So first of all, I wanted to say that almost everyone that we see in the clinic, 90% of the people that we see in the clinic, we also see behind the wheel, okay? Except if I see that there is a major issue where they're not able to meet visual standards, like acuity and visual fields, then I won't go in the car with them. However, this guy, you know, I went in the car with him, and he was just driving like a bat out of whatever. And then finally, when we came back, I said, you know, I think it's time to retire from driving. He was like, you know, I think so too. So he was good with that. So our program, we offer comprehensive driving assessment. So what that means is we do the clinical portion as well as the behind the wheel portion. I'll go in more detail about that later. We also provide behind the wheel driving lessons. So we are a Minnesota certified driving school. So although we don't do the classroom portion, we can provide the behind the wheel lessons, and that will count for the state. And I don't know how many of you have in your state whether or not you have to have certain number of hours for classroom and behind the wheel. Is that about right? Okay. And so same thing here in Minnesota. We also provide equipment evaluations where if somebody has a pure physical disability, they can come see us. I can just assess where they're at and, you know, if we can provide adaptive equipment in order to drive. So some of those pieces can be hand controls or left foot gas pedal, that type of thing. We also provide extended assessments. So if somebody comes see us and, you know, maybe they had a bad day or not really sure if I got a true picture of where they're at as far as their driving, then I might say, I'll do a driving lesson or two from your house. And we'll see if maybe you get a little bit better within your familiar surroundings. A lot of people do, so I like to give people some second chances every now and then, depending on that diagnosis. And we also provide vehicle modification evaluations. So what that means, if someone not necessarily wants to drive, but they need to modify their vehicle if they've been in an accident and they're in a wheelchair now. So we'll give them different ideas of how to modify that vehicle, okay? All right, so some of the things I want you guys to get out of today's session is to see if maybe driving might be an option for you. So how many of you, first of all, are drivers in this room? Okay, so a number of you are, good. And I'm sure before that happened, you were always wondering, you know, could I have that ability to drive? And so hopefully that will answer some of the questions for those of you that are still contemplating driving. I will also talk a little bit about the different adaptive devices that might be available for you in order to drive. So bioptic lenses, different kinds of sensors on the car, stuff like that. And who you can call if you need a driving assessment. Every state has, you know, different programs such as ours, and there is a website that you can contact and find out that piece of information. And if you are too young to drive, how can you prepare to drive? You know, and I can show you different ideas that can better help with that. So overview, we'll talk about driving assessments, what to expect, what are some of the reasons why you shouldn't drive, okay? What are some vision issues that may impact driving, and what are typical standards for each state, okay? And again, what kind of adaptations can be available for you. So in our program, we have 5 people on our staff. All of us are medically knowledgeable as far as, you know, diagnoses, populations, and different types of adaptive equipment because we're all occupational therapists, all right? So we're a little bit different from your typical driving school. We are also Minnesota licensed driver instructors as well as a certified driving rehab specialist. And all that means is that we took this national board exam about driving and had to pass it in order to become a specialist. Why is driving so important? Okay, why do you guys like to drive? You could just, why? Anybody? Awesome.
It's the coolest thing, driving down the interstate, or, you know, I feel like a Taco Bell window. It's not a necessity. You can live without it. Oh, sorry. August 10th will be my 4-year anniversary driving, and it's just the coolest feeling. It's very free, and it's an accomplishment, especially at the age that I was. And if I may, I'm trying to help you all. When you start to learn, be calm with yourself. The mistakes you make really are going to be no different than the mistakes that everybody else makes. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that in my own experience by watching other drivers' mistakes. They're really no different. And once you learn, because we do get kind of some special treatment, some special education with our driving, you're going to realize that there's worse drivers than you out there. And you very well may be a better driver than a lot of other people out there. So don't sweat it. Just give yourself time and don't beat yourself up.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, so a lot of reasons why people want to drive is because they want to be independent. They don't want to rely on other people. They want to be able to socialize with their friends and feel like they're included, you know, in different activities, okay? Some people that I've seen in the past is, you know, especially the brand new drivers I've noticed, is that they feel that they feel like they have to do it, you know? It's not like, I don't see a influx of a lot of younger generations for some reason that just want to drive all of a sudden when they're 16, you know, and I think that might be the age of technology or whatever, but it's interesting. And so they just feel like, okay, I don't really want to drive, but I just feel like it's a necessity, okay? So some reasons why somebody may not be a good candidate for driving. So depending on what state you live in, you know, they have different visual standards. I'll go over that later. But double vision is a big one, you know, why you wouldn't want to drive unless you use prism lenses to help with that double vision. Left neglect. So I see that a lot with clients that I've had in the past with strokes, okay, or a visual field cut, again, with people with strokes or brain injuries. They may not know that there's a whole left side of the road or a left side of their body. And so I've had an experience with one person that I assessed and in the clinic, and I know he knew he had that left side neglect. And so even though I knew that, I still wanted to get him on the road because he was a driver before and he wanted to see if he was able to do it again. And the whole time I'm grabbing the wheel because whenever we would make a turn, he wouldn't see the opposite side of the road. He would turn into the opposite side of the road each and every time. So it could definitely be a danger, a very high risk of a potential accident. So that's something to think about. Low vision, okay? So again, every state has its standards. There are a couple states, and we'll go over that allow people with 2200 vision in order to drive, okay, with proper training, okay, so whether or not they need bioptics to drive. Some other reasons why you wouldn't want to drive is seizures. So in Minnesota, you have to be seizure-free for 3 months before you can be a candidate. Yes, it used to be 6 months, and then they changed that to 3. So you might want to check with your state to see if that, you know, what those standards are. Poor insight. So I see a number of people ranging from a lot of dementia or autism spectrum or cerebral palsy, so a lot of different kinds of diagnoses I see. And so before comprehensive assessment, we always send a survey to that client, so asking them about their driving habits. Have they been in accidents for a couple of years, in the last 2 years? Are they staying in their own lane? How are their lane changes, that stuff. We send that same survey to a significant other or a family member. You can imagine sometimes those surveys are completely different. And so so even before I start evaluating that person, I'm looking at these surveys, I'm like, okay, there you go. That's some insight for you. So another thing is behavioral issues. So I have some, and it's mostly within either the mental health population or the brand new drivers that sometimes mentally or they're not able to gauge their amount of anger. So that's another thing, okay? Because you got to watch out for that. I mean, obviously there's a lot of bad drivers out there, but we want to make sure that the people that we see don't contribute to that. So 3 primary components for driving, some very, very important components. You need a certain amount of physical abilities, you know, also a certain amount of vision, okay, and different aspects of vision, and then as well as cognition and different aspects with that. So it's important when you drive that all these 3 systems kind of work together so that they're integrated and also coordinate with each other in order to have better success for driving. And why is vision so important for driving? So I love this. It's like 80% of your driving decisions come from what you see. I mean, that's huge, right? So you can imagine if your vision is impaired in a certain way, that can really impact your ability to react, to process information, to divide your attention, all those other things that you need in order to drive. And so, you know, with a lot of clients that I've had with some visual issues, you know, I might say before they come and see me, go see your eye doctor, you know, go see your ophthalmologist or whatever, and have them send me a report to see if you meet visual standards first. And then if they still feel like you're a good candidate, we'll work with you and we'll see if there's anything that we can help adapt in order for you to drive. I might have some clients that are pretty good drivers, but they don't have the vision enough to drive on freeways or during rush hour, so I might have different kinds of restrictions that I might recommend. So visual field, so that's one component of the vision that we take a look at in the clinic. Every state has different kinds of peripheral vision standards. In the state of Minnesota, you need to have, with both eyes, you need to have at least 105 degrees on the horizontal plane. Now I might have a person that has pretty good vision on their left eye, but they might be missing a couple degrees on the right eye, and that's okay, as long as it's not the full visual field cut. All right? Like I said, every state has its own standards. In Wisconsin, they have no peripheral vision standards. So you can literally move there and you can just see this little part and you'll be okay driving. You're still legal to drive, okay? So I've had a client that actually moved from Minnesota to Wisconsin for that reason. So again, we always refer to get an eye exam before, if that's your primary issue, is get an eye exam before you come see and do the driving evaluation to make sure that you're able to meet state standards. You might do a Humphrey or a Goldman, and that's just a formal test to see what your visual fields are like. Other things that we take a look at is visual acuity, so being able to see far distance. All right, that's just the eye chart. As you all know, 20/20 is normal vision with or without corrective lenses. Every state has its own standards. In Minnesota, it's 20/40. Okay, so you can drive at 20/40 within all the different speed limits. However, if you're beyond that, you can still drive, but it's different speed restrictions. Okay, so the lowest is the 20/80, where you need to be evaluated by the state, and usually 2100, you're not allowed to drive. Okay, in Minnesota, that is. All right. So other visual skills we take a look at is saccades, tracking, pursuit, convergence, nystagmus, and visual range of motion. So saccades is just your ability to see if you can go from one object to another and how fast you're able to do that. How you're tracking, okay, are your eyes smooth at tracking objects, okay? Are you able to converge your eyes, you know, that binocular fusion? Are your eyes working well together? Or is one eye a little bit lagging? Do you have the presence of nystagmus, and is that impairing your ability to focus and ability to see far distance, okay? Or how does that impair your vision? As well as the range of motion of your eyes, okay? So other things that we take a look at in terms of vision is, are you able to read the street signs? You know, I have an Optech machine, and that's just that machine you look at before you go to get your driver's license. They check you. But I have different kinds of street signs, and I see if they can recognize them and define them, okay? As well as, are they able to recognize colors? Because that's a big thing, right? You want to be able to see the red, green, and yellow lights. Contrast sensitivity. Can that person see at night and during bad weather? Okay, or are they having trouble with that? How are their eyes working together as a unit? That's binocular fusion. And then depth perception. Can they see objects closer than others? That's you know, that can also, usually when I see someone that has some binocular fusion issues, I also see depth perception issues as well. That can impact things because sometimes you're not able to judge distances, you know, whether or not a person is close, about to cross in front of you or too far away. Lane changes become a little bit harder to kind of gauge, okay? As well as where to stop behind a car or stop at an intersection. I see that a lot if someone has depth perception issues. Visual perception, that's how you interpret what you see. And you want to be able to do that in a fairly fast manner, okay? Because for those of you that have driven in the past, you know, when you're driving or if you're watching someone else drive, as you know, roads can change with a, you know, among seconds, where one lane can become 4 lanes, okay? That becomes more difficult to figure out when there's no lane markings or if there's snow covering those lane markings. So you have to interpret that. So someone that has visual perception issues will have a little bit of trouble being able to be able to interpret that when they're driving. So these are some pictures of how that can be with visual perception. So visual processing and organization. So I love this picture because there's a lot going on in this picture. You have, you know, the red arrow here. Oh, am I doing this wrong? Okay. You have the red arrow here, so no left turn. You have the no right turn. You have the green arrow. You have 14 seconds to go before you get through this intersection. But at the same time, if you're here, you really can't go, even though it says go. So there's a lot of different visual processing information that's going on in this picture. That's why I love it. So it's the time in which the object is seen, identified, and interpreted, and then you have to allow that to make a decision, all right? And so people that may have problem processing information, organizing that, what they see, might have a little bit of trouble reacting to what they should do in a timely manner. So here are some pictures of how visual impairments can affect driving. This is obviously a picture where it's very, very blurry, so a lot of visual acuity issues and being able to see in contrast environments. As you can tell here, a little bit of distortion, right? Okay. And this is a big key. Maybe if that person's not able to see very well, they may not know that there's a curve coming up on this road, okay? So some pictures of that. Here's another picture of distorted vision. So some blind spots that maybe this person has glaucoma, I'm not sure, but you know, they have some blind spots, so it might be covering up. This might be a person behind here, right? And so this is just an example of how that distorted vision can also impact your driving. And then this is if someone has issues with driving at night and during bad weather. This is what they see at night. They can't really see clear images. They could just see kind of the glare of the lights, right? And it's really hard to tell where you are in the lanes, right? Here's an example of just depth perception. So you got this person standing beside this parked car, and you have this other car that's a little bit further away, and this one's a little bit further away, but this person's coming straight towards you. So if you're having trouble with depth perception, it might appear that all 3 cars are the same distance, okay? So that can impact your driving. Double vision, okay? So this is really one cone, and one car, but somebody with double vision, they may see several, right? So it will be hard to kind of tell which one is the real image, you know, when I'm driving, all right, and deciphering that. So next component that we take a look at is cognition. So some areas where that may impact your cognition is obviously age. You know, as you grow older, it impacts memory, impacts reaction time and problem solving and all that kind of stuff. Also the amount of emotional stress in your life, that can also impact your cognitive issues, depression, anxiety, the amount of sleep and fatigue, you know, whenever if you're sleepy, it's just as bad as driving when you're drunk, okay? Other secondary physiological issues and medical issues. So somebody that just came out of the hospital, they have poor endurance and poor strength, that can definitely impact your ability to make sound decisions. So a lot of times when I have a client that I see for driving and they just had a stroke and they tell me that sometimes their vision gets blurrier, you know, when they're tired. So I said, well, you got to listen to your body. You have to not drive. You need to drive when you're more alert, most alert, okay? And don't drive maybe at nighttime because of those reasons, or when you get fatigued, or when you're stressed. So I might put that as a informal restriction on their paperwork. So some other cognitive factors that we take a look at in the clinic, we take a look at how they're making safe decisions, how they're problem solving through things, how they're organizing, what are they able to think outside the box, okay? How are they paying attention to multiple things? That's a huge one. And how they're processing information, what their memory's like, again, insight, impulsivity. I have some kids that come see me, and even before I tell them to turn, they start turning, you know, that kind of thing. And they're not able to help themselves. So physical abilities, that's another thing that we take a look at is, are they able to operate the vehicle smoothly and being able to do multiple things. So like, for example, turning, making a turn, okay? You have to go from the gas to the brake, okay? Also put on your blinker, also looking, make that decision, and then turn the wheel. So there's a lot of things that go on with that. So we take a look at all those, the gas, brake, turn signal, looking over the shoulder, and steering in the clinic. Do they have those abilities? And if not, can we use a piece of adaptive equipment to help them get to that point? So this is a picture of a guy in a wheelchair that's driving from his wheelchair. So, you know, he's using hand controls here, okay? And he's able to drive with that. And then sometimes, well, lots of times with people with wheelchairs, we'll also recommend different kinds of vehicles to help accommodate for that disability. So how do you know if you're a driving candidate? Well, that's where I would recommend go to your vision therapist or your eye doctor and see if you meet the state standards, and then also see if you could do a driving assessment in your area, okay? And I have some resources where to look for that. So vision standards, it varies from state to state, depending on the different types of restrictions, if they offer bioptic driving and bioptic driver licensure. In the state of Minnesota, we don't offer bioptic driving at this point, okay? We could, we just have to go through legislation and lots of training in order to do that. And here is a nice little resource, Driving with Confidence, and how to drive with low vision. So this is a resource that might be good for you to look at, as well as another website to look for different low vision specialists in your area. And this bioptic driving is for states within the country that offer bioptic driving, okay? So those are good resources for you. So there are 15 states right now that offer 2200 driving. So Alabama, Arizona, Connecticut, Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oregon, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. I went to a conference a couple years ago, and the guy that kind of started a lot of this bioptic driving is from West Virginia. And they have a pretty good program for bioptic driving, and he offers a lot of training for other people around the states. Bioptic driving usage is permitted in 49 states, but we're not all trained to actually do it. So that's the issue, yes.
Is bioptic driving automated cars?
No. Yeah, so sorry, good question. I should have. So bioptic driving is, so if someone has visual acuity of 2200 low vision, So it's actually a pair of glasses that had like a telescopic lens. And so it's, and I'll show you pictures. Yes. Yeah. So it's a way of looking through that lens to see more acutely different signs and different parts of the environment. And it's you have to do numbers of hours of driving using that piece of adaptive equipment.
If you get a license for bioptic and you're in one of the states that allows it, what if you travel into one of the states that don't?
That's a very good question. You know what? I will find out the answer to that question. I don't know that question, but that is a very good question. I would imagine that that it's pretty much just driving within that state, but that's something I should ask. Yes.
Well, I think I know the answer, but I'm just gonna go ahead and ask anyways. Is there any way to do a type of bioptic driving if you use contacts instead of glasses, or do you have to get a pair of glasses for that?
I've only seen the glasses part.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I don't know if they make contact lenses that strong.
Yeah.
So that's the. Okay, so why go to a driving rehab specialist rather than someone else? Okay, again, it goes back to, we have that medical knowledge. We're occupational therapists, so we're more familiar with different types of disabilities and how to adapt things in order to hopefully get you to a point where you're independent driving. We're also very familiar with different vehicle modifications and different strategies that you can possibly use in order to drive. We have access to other resources that may help you, okay? And in dealing with different issues with the client and the state, okay, depending on what state you live. And we're able to look at the client behind the wheel instead of just the clinic. Okay, so who can you call for a driving assessment? So in Minnesota, up here, this is our number for our program. We have other programs within the state. I think there are 4 other programs in our state that do our driving assessment, our type of driving assessment. But from other states, this is a great resource. So just go under www.aided.net, and you should be able to access your state and who is the closest it's called CDRS, within, hopefully within your state, and see if you can go see them. All right, so like I said, our comprehensive driving assessments, we have the clinical portion as well as the behind the wheel portion. And so with our clinical assessment, we utilize different kinds of standardized tests when we see each client. And we also do the behind the wheel portion. And then at the end, we talk about the outcomes on that day. So everybody who comes sees me, we do, it's a 3-hour exam. So we do the clinic, the behind the wheel, and then we talk about it. Okay, so people will go home with a report that says, yes, you can drive, or no, it's too unsafe to drive, or maybe you can drive, but let's try a couple of lessons. Or I might recommend what's called the extended assessment, or I might recommend driving with restrictions. Okay. Who can refer to us? We do private pay, and so it's not necessary that a doctor has to refer to us, but it's recommended, okay? Because usually when they come see us, they might see us because a therapist or a doctor recommended or a family member recommended it. And so or sometimes the state might recommend it. You know, if the state knows that you have some kind of progressive disease, whatever, they might get a letter from the state and they have to come see us, and then we send that report to the doctor who referred it, and then back to the state. So the doctor is the link for the information to become legal through the state. Okay, most states are like that too. All right, but again, check with your state department and see if that applies. So in the comprehensive, the clinical part. When I first see a client, we talk. We just do a lot of talking. I take a look at the surveys that they received. I take a look at their medications, and if they use anything that might impact their driving. I also find out, how are they getting around right now? If they're driving, where do they drive? Okay, because not everybody, some people just restrict themselves to certain times a day and certain areas. And so I talk about that. I look at their physical abilities, I look at their different parts of their vision, their reaction time, and their cognition with those different standardized tests. And then we go behind the wheel. We have 5 vehicles that we could possibly use. The vehicle that I use most is just a regular Ford Fusion. It's nothing fancy about it, but I can put different kinds of equipment like hand controls or a left foot gas pedal in it if that person needs it. And I go on a certain route to see how that person's drives. So I always start a person maybe in the, if it's a person that doesn't have a permit, I'll just see them in the parking lot. But if it's a person that comes to see me and they may need a piece of adaptive equipment, I'll see them in the parking lot too. But if it's just a regular person driving, they want to just see how they drive, then I'll take them to some residential roads, I take them to some busier parking lots, I take them to areas where it's a little bit busier, where they have to make decisions whether or not to turn left or right. I take them on some curvy roads. I also take them on freeways, okay, because I want to see how they drive in those faster areas, okay. I look to see, are they staying in their own lane? How are their coordination with their turns? Are they able to identify different potential hazards? Are they seeing the person that's about to walk across the intersection, okay? Are they able to notice that they're going too fast, all right? Are they able to pay attention to multiple things? I had this one guy who's driving, and the whole time he's just like looking at all the billboards, instead of the road. And so, and then other times, a lot of older people, for some reason, they have a lot of trouble staying in their own lane. So I said, okay, we need to get over a little bit because it's just the way they're tracking. So I have to grab the wheel numbers of times. So all of our cars has a student brake on our car. So it's wonderful. And so it has really saved my life numbers of times. So yeah, so I take a look at how they do on the drive, and I also offer some pieces of advice. So if I feel like I always anticipate that person in the very beginning, they're going to make mistakes. Okay, I try to put them at ease. So let's just drive. But everybody's a little nervous. They're not used to somebody watching them as they drive, so they're going to make some mistakes. So I point them out to see if they get better. And so if I see that there is some improvement from start to finish, then I might be a little bit more. I shouldn't say nicer, but with my recommendations, I'll say yes, they can drive with certain restrictions or what have you. So I take a look at that, so that that really helps to see that behind the wheel. I'm kind of going back though. We always do the clinic and the behind the wheel. Now some people, they just don't do well in the clinic, for whatever reason. Whether it's because they had aphasia where they're not able to make those types of decisions, or they just don't have the education background in order to do well in the clinical part. So, but they may be fantastic drivers, right? So I always ask that person, what your driving experience has been like in the past. What did you do for a living? Some people have been salespeople, right? So they travel a lot, and so their driving might be a lot better than their clinical part. And I've seen the opposite, right? So a lot of the newer drivers, so especially people on the autism spectrum, they may be doing fantastic in the clinic, but terrible drivers. And so, we always do both parts because one doesn't equal the other all the time. And so we always offer the benefit of the doubt. So these are some common driving errors that we see with people that have some kind of visual impairments. Might have those rolling stops, okay, where they're not stopping completely. They might have some poor speed control because they're not seeing those speed limit signs fast enough, okay? They're not checking their blind spots, right, before they change lanes. They're just looking in the mirrors, and they're not necessarily, oh yeah, I gotta look back behind you, because sometimes when you have visual impairments, you're focusing on so many different things that I see a lot of forward gaze where it's really hard to look at different angles, you know, when they're driving. And so they may just forget to check that blind spot. So that, again, that's going to require a lot more training. No early visual checks. So example is a railroad crossing. So not noticing, oh yeah, there's a railroad coming up ahead. I need to start looking, you know, before they even get there. Or they may get there at the last moment, and that's when they check, or they might check late, okay? Head checks opposite direction of turns, okay? So, you know, let's say that I'm turning right, okay? And so that person may be checking to the right instead of to the left to make sure cars are not coming from that way. So not checking properly. All right, some adaptive equipment possibilities. So some non-prescriptive equipment that I might recommend are some what's called panoramic mirrors, okay? And that gives you, if you have visual field cuts, it's a mirror that you could put on your rear view mirror that will extend that visual field, okay, when you're driving. Nowadays, with all the newer technology in the cars, they have all these wonderful things like backup cameras, you know, or sensors, you know, when you're backing up, or like those sensors on the side mirrors that tell you when you can get into the other lane, okay, so those lane changes. It's wonderful. And then some other things, padded steering wheel, seat belt extensors, some cushions, adaptive key holders, some prescriptive equipment. So what that means is, you know, if somebody has a physical disability and they might need hand controls, a left foot gas pedal or a spinner knob, okay, or pedal extenders because that person's a little shorter. So those types of equipment, when I say prescriptive, that means that in the state of Minnesota, that is, they have to get a driving assessment, a comprehensive driving assessment, and be prescribed this equipment before they will put that equipment in your car, okay? And I'm not sure how it is in other states, but that's something that you might want to find out per your state, and you can find that out through that aidnet.net. So kind of touch base with this. So again, after the drive, we'll come back. I'll bring the client and the family member come back to the clinic, and I finish typing the report, and then I give them the outcomes. So, you know, I might recommend with restrictions. So formal restrictions in Minnesota, they can drive only during the day, or no freeways, okay, or within a certain mile radius from home, okay, or no rush hour. Those are the typical restrictions that we might recommend, okay? Or I might say you can drive without any restrictions, you're fine, all right? But if it's somebody that has a progressive disease, whether it's you know, an eye disease, or whether it's MS or Parkinson's, then I might say, okay, you can drive, you know, within this first year. Let's see if anything happens, or if your disease has progressed, then come back and see me and we can do a reassessment, okay? I might recommend some equipment or driving lessons. If you use equipment, you have to retake the state road test with that equipment in the state of Minnesota in order to legally use that equipment. And then I said possible reassessment in the future. Other things I might recommend, no driving. That's where a lot of people don't really like me. But you know, I have to think about, you know, you got to think about the safety of yourself and the safety of others. That's really the bottom line. If you feel like, you know, it's very hard to drive in different kinds of areas, and you're just very fearful or what have you, or you don't have that insight, then you just gotta think about the safety. Okay, that's really the bottom line. So if it is recommended no driving, then I always provide that person a list of different alternative ways to get around. Okay, so I find out what county they live in, and I'll do a search, and I'll give them that equipment. I will also, that list, I will also give them other resources, such as different support groups, or ways to get their groceries or medications or what have you. So I'll give them that too. And I might recommend a future reassessment. So some people, when they come see me, it might be too early in their injury, whether they had a stroke or, in the last 2 months, and it's just too early in order to really see where they're at, all right? So this goes a little bit more into detail about the different restrictions. I kind of said that. And then I might also recommend just familiar areas. Okay, so for someone that has memory issues, and even not only just memory issues, maybe someone that has visual impairments and they just know that the different types of environments and signage and everything within their familiar area, then I might recommend that. No in-vehicle distractions, such as talking on the cell phone or texting. You're not supposed to do that anyway. GPS, talking. So when I'm on the behind the wheel portion with my clients, I like to talk. So I talk a lot to them because I want to see if they're able to remember directions and make these decisions while you're talking. So I look at how they're able to manage their attention. And so if I see an issue with that, then I might say, you know what, let's try not, I recommend no in-vehicle distractions for you. Adaptive equipment, like I said, the bioptic lens system, panoramic mirrors, some backup sensors, stuff like that. So what are possible adaptive devices that could allow me to drive? We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, the backup cameras and sensors, the blind spot awareness lights, dashboard controls or modifications, okay? And then this is all the eyeglass wear that we were talking about earlier that you showed us with your glasses with the bioptics. And that can enhance your ability to see distance. All right, so these are just some pictures of backup cameras and sensors, okay? How many of you guys have these types of things in your car? Yeah. So a lot of the newer cars, they have a lot of backup cameras, which is wonderful. And some of them are better than others. You know, some of them have the auditory portion to it too. These are just different clip wear that you could put onto your glasses if the glare is an issue, okay? And these are the different kinds of bioptic lens systems, okay? So when we train, well, I don't train people on how to use this right now, just because we don't have that system in Minnesota. But when I went to the conference, the guy from West Virginia was saying that they train for at least 90 to 100 hours with a person to how to use these bioptic lenses. So they train you to look through these lenses down here as well as in here to do fine focusing, so looking at the signage, okay? So it's a lot of back and forth, okay? So, so for those of you who are not driving right now or too young, you know, these are certain things that you can do in order to prepare for driving. You could start when the child is very, very young, okay? Where you can work on a lot of bilateral coordination activities, okay? Working on them in different kinds of environments. So like those big wheels, okay? You remember those big wheels where you're in a little car? But it's wonderful, you know, because you can do a lot of scavenger hunts with your child and make sure they're looking and paying attention and reading signs. So that all those things prepare you to drive. Any kind of sport, working on because I think of driving as a team sport. You know, you're always watching out, anticipating what other cars are going to do. Same thing with sports, okay? Also working on that coordination piece between the upper body and lower body. Bike riding is a huge thing if that is available to you. It's working on that coordination. You have to follow the rules of the road anyway, so that's going to get you more aware of what's going on the road. Riding in the front seat. You know, I had a client, or even if they're riding the car, are they paying attention while they're riding the car? A lot of kids these days, they're on their phones, even adults, but they're on their phones or, you know, they're not paying attention. So try to engage your son or daughter to pay attention when they're in the car. What are they seeing? Maybe have them tell you how to get from the house to the school one day. Give them directions so that you're working on those navigational skills. Is that person medically stable, or is it too early to think about driving? Are they financially ready? You know, I've had clients that come see me, they want to drive, you know, but they have no means to, you know, get a car. They haven't thought that far ahead. They haven't planned that far ahead. So it's not just a matter of driving. Are they psychologically ready? Some sons or daughters, they're just not mature enough at this point. And so I might say, you know, let's wait 2 or 3 years, come back and see me and see if it gets better. Okay? All right. And that is it for my presentation. Do you have any questions for me? Yes.
So you were talking about the backup cameras and the blind spot adapters and all that, but what's your opinion on those things that tell you when you're leaving your lane?
Oh, like the lane changers?
Well, like they like let you know if you're leaving your lane without your blinker, so that if you're accidentally drifting, then.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's great.
You think those work?
Yep.
There's also now lane keep assist, which will actually steer you back into the lane.
See, you're more up on it than I am, but yeah, I think any kind of device like that is wonderful.
Okay.
Those safety features are great. Here.
Do you see the laws changing on what visual requirements are required state by state as cars become more automated?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, I think one day, you know, I think right now it's still too early in the game. I think they need a lot more knowledge as far as what those cars are capable of doing. But I think maybe in time that will change, for sure. We had a question over here. Okay.
I was just wondering, when we were talking about mirrors, have you yourself seen the blind spot mirrors that you can buy at Walmart or Target? They're like $5.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like them? Do you recommend them? I bought them. I just not have put them on my mirror. I don't want to put them on wrong, but you recommend them?
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the clips for the glare, the sun. Where can I get some of those?
They are optometrists. You can
Okay,
find them, or some of the ophthalmologists may have some ideas of where to get them. Yes. Okay. Sometimes we recommend vision therapy. You know, if we have a client that has a lot of visual impairments, I say, you know, let's go to your vision therapist. They have different vision therapists in different states. Again, they're mostly occupational therapists, but they'll work on different skills for driving. So they'll work on, you know, tracking. They work on the convergence factor. They work on multitasking with visual processing speed. So, and I've seen really good progress after I've had clients with vision therapy. Okay.
How long of a wait period is it from a phone call saying I want the assessment done?
Good question. Summer times are usually really busy, but it all depends. So right now we have like a 1 month waiting period for clients, but we have 10 different locations and we have some cancellations. So there's like a wait list. But it's easier to get into during off season than on season. Yes. Mm-hmm. But it depends on, you know, where the assessment is taking place, because they have a lot of different ones per your state. So, yeah. Any other questions?
One of the possible recommended restrictions is familiar areas. How is familiar defined? Like, if you've been there before, does that count?
If it's something that's like an ongoing basis, where you like going to church or going to the grocery store, if you go there all the time, but if you go somewhere where it's like maybe once every 6 months, I may not necessarily think that's a familiar area. So I talk with that client and find out exactly where they normally go. I might go to their house and actually see how they drive in those familiar areas. Okay? Anywhere else? Anyone else? Okay. I should have worn different shoes. Okay.
This isn't necessarily vision related,
Okay.
but my daughter has mild cerebral palsy in her right foot, and I know you mentioned the left gas pedal, which is something I've seen.
Yeah, because I have a hard time reaching over.
But it's
Okay.
well, that was my question. Is like, is that something you always recommend, or do you have people that learn to drive using just their left foot on a regular gas pedal?
Yes.
That kind of.
Did everybody hear her question? So her daughter has some weakness on the right foot, and do we recommend initially trying the left foot gas pedal? Yes, we do. So even if you've never driven in your life, and if that's the best and the most appropriate and safest way to drive, we'll teach you with that device. In fact, it's easier to teach someone when they've never driven how to drive with a certain adaptive device, because they haven't driven in a certain way for a long time.
But do you have people that use the left foot on the right steering wheel, on the right gas pedal?
Oh, it's not encouraged because you can get tangled up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's really hard for me to reach over with my left foot.
Yeah.
Like me to do that.
Yeah, and so that I might recommend getting a
Yeah, I was really
driving
interested when
assessment.
you said that. I'm like, okay.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. If you Oh, thank you so much. I am so thankful that you invited me to participate, and hope you have a great rest of your conference, and good luck with everything. And come see me if you're in Minnesota.